What happens when one of the world's most recognizable podcast hosts sits down with the artist who helped define his brand? In this episode of the Joe Rogan Experience, we get a deep, real, and surprisingly raw conversation between Joe Rogan and visual artist Mike Maxwell, a longtime friend, a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and the man behind the original JRE logo. This episode isn't just about art, it's about creative flow, psychedelics, self-discipline, martial arts, addiction, nutrition, ADHD, and even how humans hunted antelope before weapons. So, let's break it all down. The story behind the JRE logo. Joe opens by introducing Mike Maxwell as the creator of the JRE logo, the wide-eyed, psychedelic face you've seen all over the internet. But Mike reveals that the logo wasn't some planned piece. It was a result of many separate drawings that slowly came together. He didn't even expect it to be used as a brand image. It was just another piece of art in a long line of work he had been doing. Mike's approach to art is simple. He makes the work and lets go of what happens after. If someone discovers it, great. If not, he keeps going. Joe respects that he points out that true success in art often comes from constant practice, not just talent. Mike agrees he's been drawing and painting for 25 young years. Every day. He says there's no such thing as natural talent in his case. It's all grind. Talent might open a door, but hard work walks through it. How creativity works, according to an artist. Joe and Mike start digging deeper into how creativity actually works. Mike says that when he paints, sometimes it feels like the painting is doing itself. He becomes just a channel. The decisions come automatically, and he feels disconnected in a good way. It's not thinking, it's flow. Joe brings up how writers say the same thing. At a certain point, the characters start acting on their own. It's as if the story is writing itself. But both agree that only happens after you've done all the prep. You can't get to flow without putting in the hard, slow work first. PAD. Drugs, psychedelics, and creativity. Then the topic shifts. Joe brings up authors like Hunter S. Thompson, wild personalities who used a lot of drugs, but still produced genius-level work. Mike admits he used LSD heavily as a teen, around age 16, taking it twice a week one summer. He wonders if it helped him see the world differently, maybe even shaped his creativity, not necessarily by making him more talented, but by shifting how he views reality. Joe agrees and adds that some people like Steve Jobs even credit a single LSD trip with transforming their entire way of thinking. But they both acknowledge it's not a magic pill. Some people crash and burn on drugs. Others come out with insights. They touch on dopamine and serotonin damage from addiction and how drug abuse leads to long-term brain damage, especially with cocaine and crack. It's unsustainable. Eventually, your brain just doesn't produce pleasure chemicals the same way. You can feel permanently below baseline. Cumin, persistence hunting, and human endurance. Then, out of nowhere, Joe takes us into prehistoric survival. He explains how humans could run animals to death by using sweat glands, something most animals don't have. This method, called persistence hunting, involved humans jogging after deer for miles. Not faster than the animal, just longer. Eventually, the animal would overheat and collapse. Mike is amazed, like, who figured this out? Why did anyone think chasing a deer for 10 miles would work? It leads to a bigger point. Human bodies are adaptable. We sweat to cool down. We were built to endure, not just sprint. It's a great metaphor for everything they're talking about. Art, training, life. It's not about quick wins. It's about going the distance. Mike's journey into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Now we hit another major turn, martial arts. Mike is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He says he got into it around 2008 during the financial crisis when everything felt unstable. His motivation? He thought, if things get crazy, maybe I should know how to fight. At his first class, he got hip-tossed hard by a purple belt. He was shocked, but instantly hooked. He realized jiu-jitsu isn't about brute strength, it's about control, technique, and precision. It reminded him of painting, solving problems, staying calm under pressure, learning through failure. He didn't tap anyone out for an entire year. He trained at a gym where MMA fighters practice. It was tough, but that pressure made him better. Joe agrees. He says jiu-jitsu is a moving meditation. It clears your mind like nothing else. And it's the same with painting. When you're in the zone, the world disappears. Your focus becomes razor sharp. Health, nutrition, and cutting sugar. The topic shifts again, this time to diet. Mike shares that he cut sugar out of his life completely, and the results were immediate. He lost 15 pounds quickly. His mood improved. His energy stabilized. He talks about how sugar gives you tiny dopamine hits, but leaves you feeling drained. Joe connects this to his own experience, saying sugar is poison, especially when you're tired. That's when you make bad choices. Potato chips, ice cream, cereal, you know it's bad, but you crave it because you're mentally weak in those moments. They both talk about the benefits of fasting. Mike often eats just one meal a day, sometimes at 5 p.m. He drinks coffee, stays focused, and doesn't feel hungry. Over time, the hunger becomes part of the process, almost enjoyable. Joe explains how eating only protein and fat changes everything. You stop depending on sugar. Your body uses ketones for energy, and you stop getting those intense cravings. It's a game changer. ADHD, creativity, and misdiagnosis. Then, they talk about the ADHD label. Mike says if he had the wrong parents, he probably would have been drugged as a kid. Joe agrees so many creative kids are misunderstood, bored in class, and labeled as disruptive. But give them video games or art, and suddenly they focus like machines. Joe hates how many kids are put on Adderall or Ritalin just to make them more manageable. He calls it lazy parenting and a broken system. These kids don't need drugs, they need better outlets. The power of creative communities. Toward the end, they talk about the value of community in creative fields. Joe explains how Austin's comedy scene is exploding. There are 5 full-time comedy clubs, and young comics are surrounded by mentors, opportunity, and support. Mike says the visual art world doesn't have that. It's more isolated. Artists don't hang out and share ideas like comics do. He wishes there were more real-world creative hubs for painters, the way there are for comedians. Final wisdom: focus on the process. As they wrap up, Mike shares his life philosophy. He doesn't set goals, no vision boards, no 5-year plans, just routine. Every morning he wakes up, grabs coffee, and paints. That's it, and it brings him joy. He compares it to meditation. Whether it's painting or jujitsu, he loses himself in the process. The external rewards, fame, money, status aren't what matter. What matters is doing the work. Outro: what we learned from Mike Maxwell. So what can we take from this conversation? That you don't need to chase attention to build something meaningful. That creativity comes from showing up daily, even when it's boring. That mental clarity, health, and discipline are all connected. And that greatness, whether in art, martial arts, or life, is never about shortcuts. It's about the long game. If you enjoyed this breakdown, hit subscribe. Drop a comment. What did you learn? And which Joe Rogan podcast should we break down next? This has been your full cinematic explainer of JRE 2359 with Mike Maxwell. Until next time, stay curious, stay focused, and keep creating.